But like, then I saw your thing where like, we're the anti-consultancy. And I'm like, that's bold. Like, that's a nice, okay. So what does that mean? So we were talking about like discovery, because that's what I think. And I guess my opine on this was like, I do think we need to change. And the messaging you're having, the saying, we're not going to come in and do the same cookie cutter, like we're the anti-consultancy. I'm like, that is going to resonate. And that's certainly, but like, what does that mean? How does that look? And I don't know if
Yeah.
we do it on this call, but like, so if you're not like, what do consultancies do that you don't now? Like, what makes you different?
Building great experiences. Revolutionize your business. Building great experiences. Innovative strategies. Building great experiences. Elevate for your customers. Like, comment, and subscribe.
Hey folks, this is Drew with another episode of the Building Great Experiences podcast. I have somebody I'm very excited to announce to you, Ronnie Batista, great friend, colleague, mentor that I've worked with in my past life. He has a lot of interesting things in his background. He is currently working as a leader at the research lab for Chubb in the New York area. Yeah, we've got a show for you. We're going to talk a lot about a lot of things. We're going to talk about future customer experience. We're going to talk about consulting. So yeah, Ronnie, thanks for being on the show, man.
I am so happy to be here. It's been a while since we talked, and some background maybe for some listeners is that we both worked at Slalom together, and I used to lead the XT community there, and we had an offsite meeting where I just want to call out that Drew was just kept punching, kept throwing, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? At the time, I kind of shut him down. I was like, whoa. And afterward, I walked up to him and I said, Drew, I'm like, you are absolutely like, because Drew was newer to the organization. I'm like, thank you. Like, we need you. We need people like you throwing those haymakers, whatever. And I was that person that did that. So I just want to say it is so good to always be with a kindred spirit here. And one of the reasons that I'm really excited for you and the adventure you're on with Stealth is that you actually are trying to disrupt, I think, the machinations of what this design ecosystem has become. And I love to hear it. I'm really interested to hear more about that. So anyway, really happy to be here.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Well, appreciate the shout outs. Yeah. So let's start by first just giving folks a little bit of backstory. Like, who are you? Where have you been? What have you done? I know, you shared you were at Slalom with me and now you're at Chubb, but maybe talk to folks a little bit about your history and your origin story in the design space.
Sure. So I'll try to do this pretty briefly. I was a business process engineer at Accenture and basically really was not finding much satisfaction. I wasn't really that good at it compared to my peers, and was offered basically an opportunity to go into this basically mothballed usability lab that was built and never used. Kind of fell in and just was like a duck to water, really understood, learned on the job, taught myself, every single role. I was a one-man shop. I was a one-man UX team for a while. And then that grew that to about 17 and then left Accenture and did a few other things along the way. But generally speaking, about 20 of my 22 or 3 of my years have been in the consulting side of user experience. And now I am, since my last job is now more on the corporate side, which is, wow, talk about an interesting change in culture.
Yeah, it's funny. So for those who don't know Ronnie and I share a lot of like unorthodox approaches to solving problems. And one of the things that I love about Ronnie, he and I were involved in some stuff a few years ago. And I remember kind of had this big fist on the table moment, which was like execution is strategy. And this idea that you have to do to really like make things happen. You can't just sit and talk about it and pontificate. And I 100% believe in that approach. Like, strategy is important, but execution, like if you don't do anything about it, then it doesn't matter, right? So execution really is the key. So Ronnie, maybe talk a little bit about, you've seen a lot of different organizations over the last 20 plus years. You've seen how they've approached user and customer experience. You've been in-house, you've been on the consulting side. You've kind of seen a lot of different things. And so I wanted to start the conversation really around this idea that like looking back at the way things have gone for the last 20 plus years, what do you think the next 20 plus years are going to look like?
I've been thinking a lot about this. It's a great question. I think that it's going to sound duplicitous. One side of me says nothing's going to change. And the other side of this says AI is going to significantly disrupt what's happening. And I say nothing's going to change because I can show you decks from Accenture about holistic experiences, omnichannel. The same arguments that we've been making, they have not changed. So if I've learned anything, it's design and change is a provocative act in an organization. And one of my epiphanies in the last year, right, spending some of that unemployed and some of that in a new company, is that is never going to change. And that I had this belief, Pollyannish as it were, and I used to espouse that we are going to get to the top of the mountain. And when we get there, but the fact is our job, this is our vocation. Our vocation is to go out there and say, we got to change things up. So we're always going to be seen as wait a second, that's not right. And so if you are in this field or thinking about going in this field, you need to accept that you will never be universally accepted and you will have to make your case consistently. And I only say that because, to your point, I literally have decks. I had a conversation just recently where I'm I can show you from 2014, we did this already. We talked about this. And the decks that I had, I borrowed from people that already created up, material from that. So it's not really changing. I think what is going to be interesting is how design renders itself within organizations, given what continues to be total erosion of design leadership within organizations. I'll sort of index it with when AI came out, sort of in the early, in 2023. But as I've seen in the last month, 3 leaders of major corporations who are equivalent to where they're all being let go. So we are still in the throes of, organizations spending a lot of time worried more about quarterly numbers and looking at us as a nice to have versus a need to have.
Yeah. Agreed across the board. I think I've been really pounding the table, if you will, on how folks who do what we do kind of help organizations improve the experience for people. You need to be able to tell the story around how it makes an impact on the business, because that's right now, and probably will continue to be the most important thing. And where it makes sense and where you're able to influence the organization to also understand the other components, which are, inclusivity, accessibility, right? All the things that we hold to be true, but often get kind of punted because it's well, that doesn't drop down to the bottom line. We're not going to increase revenue because of that. So I think of it as you're helping organizations drive the business outcomes that they're looking for. And at the same time, you're helping educate and influence around these other elements that are so important. But I think we've almost over the last several years, particularly 2020 to 2022, there was this kind of era where designers could kind of say whatever they wanted to say, right? And they could ask for whatever amount of money they wanted to ask for.
We were important. People liked us.
Right. And everybody was wow, this is amazing. Applause. And there's, all these reports that have come out, design-led organizations, design, thinking the impact. But I think, this is my hypothesis, I think a lot of folks, it was a lot of talk, a lot of wind, and not a lot of movement, a lot of progress towards actually moving the needle. And so then whenever people started to really dig into the numbers, they're this is a cost center. We're paying for this design organization, this, group of people. And we're not really getting any kind of outcome or value from it from a business perspective. So when the time comes where we got to make cuts, they're just cut that cost center because we don't need it anymore. And that's where I think that, design folks are going to have to get super knowledgeable, credible on the business side. And then once they have that, then be able to influence on the other stuff, right?
Yep. So this is a good time to share why I'm excited. And I'm going to be asking you some questions about Stealth, because, You are absolutely right. And I don't know if you recall at one of our virtual offsites, I was talking about the epoch of experience. We've been saying era of experience, whatever, but I'm like, this is it between the business roundtable of 2018, COVID restrictions, like we have finally, like 2022, like we have arrived. And I was like, oh my God, we're finally here. That lasted as long as the economy, right? I mean, let's go. It's the economy, stupid. So bottom line was this was all super business driven. And I do think, as I'm seeing now, both on the corporate side, but I do think it's really important that we need to rethink what it is we do and how we show up. And here's where I'm going to give you some super kudos and with some questions. But when you were first reaching out, I will tell you, when you were first starting out this your organization, you were posting a lot of, you had a newsletter, you had a podcast, and I'm like, okay, like certainly you got to get your brand out there. What are you saying that's new? And there was a couple of posts you had that were like, you need to listen to your customer. And I'm like, Drew, like, that's not my Drew. Like, no, like, yeah, of course that. And of course, again, for your brand building, you want to get some of the basics out there. But I'm like, okay, because there are 700 people that post every day the same that, again, has existed for talk to your customer, listen, iterate, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, what is new? And then, so I'm like, so I was planning on like getting on this call. We were going to be, I'm going to like, let's go. Cause we love each other. So like, we can kind of spar. But like, then I saw your thing where like, we're the anti-consultancy. And I'm like, that's bold. Like, that's a nice, okay. So what does that mean? So we were talking about like discovery, because that's what I think. And I guess my opine on this was like, I do think we need to change. And the messaging you're having, the saying, we're not going to come in and do the same cookie cutter, like we're the anti-consultancy. I'm like, that is going to resonate. And that's certainly, but like, what does that mean? How does that look? And I don't know if we do it on this call, but like, so if you're not like, what do consultancies do that you don't now? Like what makes you different?
Yeah. It's a great question. Well, first of all, it's funny to your point on the content. Like I've wrestled with like, what content do people care about or find valuable? And it's funny because like to people who have done this for a long time, like it's like old news, right? Like listen to your customer, right? Care about what people think about. So you're like, well, listen to, what are their needs and their wants and all those things. But I realized like, as I've been talking to business leaders, funny enough, they don't understand or know about the fundamentals. Like when you're like, hey, maybe you should, I don't know, talk to your customer. They're like, yeah, I probably should do that. And you're like, in my mind, I'm like, this is like not a novel thing, but in the business universe, it is fairly unusual, right? And so while, one of the things that I would just put out there is like, I've been trying to communicate the tried and true concepts in a way that business leaders and executives can like wrap their head around and be able to actually like do something about it, like make it more practical, make it more real, make it very clearly connected to business. Like, if I'm a marketer, why do I give a crap about what you're saying? If I'm a business leader, if I'm a CEO, if I'm a founder, like, Drew, that's fine, whatever. But like, how do I make real money from this? And that's where I'm really trying to draw the connection point. And so anyway, so your point is spot on. Like the content is nothing new, but for a different audience is brand new. Like they've never heard it before.
And I totally, by the way, totally understand that as a new business owner, advertising yourself locally, whatnot, that you do need to get out, like, here are some fundamentals. What I'm only saying is that the amount of newsletter and podcast people coming out there, like, if you have a newsletter, you better have something new to say. Like, say something new, because that is the piece. Like, and I only sign up to one newsletter, which is not even UX related, because every time I've tried, I'm like, oh my God, you're like, provoke me, like challenge me, but like, don't send me, here are the top 10 statistics, which by the way, are the same statistics about CX and UX that we were showing 20 years ago that have about as much impact when they show it on the screen in the PowerPoint. Like nobody gives a shit. So you got me.
Yeah. So the anti-consultant banner, that I espouse is like the having worked in consulting, having been around consultants, like I've been on both sides of the table. And it's funny because those, for those who are listening who maybe didn't see them, we did a series of a couple of videos that I kind of like pointed, shook my fist at the sun, if you will. Right. And a couple of the sort of scenarios that I painted was, one was around this idea that like a lot of times you're listening to a consultant talk, you have no idea what they're talking about. Right. they're throwing a lot of like big words, and they're coming across like, we have been here, we know this, we have these proven methods, blah blah blah, and the client is a little scared to say like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? But they don't want to look stupid. Nobody wants to look stupid, so everyone's just sort of like, yeah, sure, I guess that's cool. And then fast forward, and like weeks, months later, they get a deck from the consultants, and they're like, okay, thanks. And then they turn around, they're like, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I don't know what this means. I don't know how to implement it. I don't know. So like really where, one of the big things on that one, for example, the big things I believe in is like, you have to articulate things, simply say things to people where they like really understand what you're saying. You have to really like bring it to them in a way that they can consume. And then you have to sometimes, like a lot of times, you just have to like get in the trenches and do the work. Like, I was talking to somebody recently, and I was kind of like, we were talking about this whole idea of the anti-consultants, and she simply said, it was like, less words, more work. And I was like, exactly. Like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to like wave my hands around. I just want to do the work. I just want to get in there and be like, let me show you what I mean. Let me here, like, I'm going to make you stuff, and then, we're going to show you. And to give an example, like real time right now, we have a pitch like on Monday, and instead of doing the classic, like, consulting thing where we kind of wave our hands around and like talk about all the work we've done in our past and how much better we are than other people, we're actually like making stuff. Like, we're making examples of what it could be based on what we know right now, and we're presenting it as like, hey, this is from just our experience and us like digging in and doing homework about you. Like, we actually made some stuff, like we prototyped some stuff for you that we wanted to demonstrate what it could be. And we've done this like a number of times now. And I was doing this at Slalom as well. And it's like, that helps people really like be like, yes. And then you go do it. Right. The other thing, like in the whole anti-consultant vein, is like, a lot of times people just, it's this rinse repeat. And I kind of like, we made this little joke about it because in the commercial, somebody was like, hey, don't forget to change the client's name this time, right? And then like they go and they're presenting to the client, and they're actually like, it's like insert client name here, right? Or it has like the other client's logo. And like, I've seen that happen too many times where people are using, they're not really thinking, they're just like sticking stuff together that was from other people's stuff and not really solving the problem. They're like just slapping stuff from other people's problems or solutions together. And I think that's, fundamentally, I think that's part of what we're trying to be against. It's like, hey, we're going to actually solve your problem. We're going to actually get in there and do something that's for you, and we're going to do it fast, and we're going to focus only on value. Like, if you don't make more money or if you don't save more money, then we didn't do our job, period. Right? Like, that's the like the essence of it, right? And the other one last thing I'll say, and then I'll pause. Like the I think it's the attitude of like, I don't know, but I'll figure it out, is a really like core essence of the philosophy. Like, there are things that we know, but there's a lot of things we don't know. And like, really, given it's 2025, the world is evolving very rapidly. I don't think there's very many people who like have everything figured out and have done everything before, right? Like, the world is changing so quickly. So I think it's pretty ridiculous to be like, we know things. We've done this so many times. Like, no, you haven't. Like, AI, this generation of AI has only existed for like 2 years. Like, you don't know. Like, you're making it up. Everybody's making it up. Like, don't act like you know. But if you're like, we have the confidence to try, and we're gonna like help. We're gonna help you by like being with you in the boat, and we're gonna row the boat. I mean, we may not have like climbed this exact mountain, but we've climbed mountains that are like this mountain, and so we're pretty convinced that we can help get there. But yeah, I don't know. I think the simple version of it is like, less words, more work, and like focus on making money or saving money. Those are like the two components of it.
Love it. I think when you going back to my Khrushchev banging execution and strategy, that resonating with you makes a ton of sense, because again, for the listeners, in terms of Drew inherited a growing, small but growing team in North Carolina, and was very, very short order established himself, because you actually got done. And personally, like, talking to you was always hard, because you were actually a leader that was like in the weeds every 5 minutes. Like, you were a very, very busy person. So that piece, like that cotton to you, does not surprise me. That said, and by the way, listeners, I have not been, but I would love to continue to poke on anti-consultancy because I like the line and that example of let's do a little bit of homework ahead of time before a meeting with a client makes sense, but consultants do that. Okay. So what I think that I don't hear, and if I was on the buying side of you, what I am prepared to, and maybe you've come across this, but if you show me a deck, you're a consultant, right? If you show me a timeline, you're a consultant. If you show me anything that I think it's I love the statement, but I'd love a better understanding of, let me show you 2 projects. Here's one where we want to learn about X. This is how a consultant will do it. This is going to be 5 weeks, X amount of time. We do it like this. Here's another situation, give me 3 use cases where it's this is what I used to do in my previous life. And 90% of that was bullshit. And to your point, so to set us up for phase 2 or for the bus of other services we want to come sell to you versus I come in here, we're 2 weeks, 2 guys, this and that, and this is how we do it.
Yeah. I think, so in the consulting world, there's the classic, do the discovery, 4, 8 weeks, whatever, how long, right? To go gather all the stuff, analyze the stuff, come back and tell you what to do about the stuff. And then you go solve the problem, right? There's this whole we're going to find the right problem and then we're going to go solve the problem. So now the client's paid you $500,000 to basically tell them what their problems are.
Right. They pay you. Yeah. You give them the watch to tell you what time it is and it costs you the watch.
Yeah. And I think really what we're trying to do is let's shorten the time to value as much as we possibly can by saying we're going to use new and emerging technology to make that process of figuring out what the problems are, the most important problems, as fast as possible. So we're doing the thing to fix it as quickly as possible. Because I want as much of the money that they're paying us to be towards the solution, the actual thing. So in this case, let's say it's this will give you just a really real world example. One of the first projects we did with StealthX was manufacturing company was trying to figure out, they sold historically to businesses and they wanted to sell to customers. So they were we don't know anything about e-commerce. We don't really know what this looks like. And we're cool, we'll help you do it. And we're going to do it in 8 weeks. And they were what? Right? So we went in and we call ourselves SEALs, not Marines. We're instead of taking we're going to slowly, methodically figure out who your customers are and then put together all these assets and artifacts that you don't give a shit about and you don't ever going to look at anyway. We're going to just make stuff, put it in front of people, get feedback, iterate fast, build it and launch it. And so in the course of 8 weeks, we built and launched an e-commerce platform. That would never happen in the big consultancies. That would take a year. I've seen it. It would probably take more than that because you say, well, we need 4 teams of 10 engineers and this team's going to be focused on architecture and then this team's going to be focused on this. And then, and now you're looking at 7 figures to build an e-commerce thing when it's ridiculous. It's absurd. I remember I've been on countless conversations where, the amount of time and money that we're, that are required to do something to solve a problem. You're what? That's ridiculous. Who's going to pay for that? And then people still pay for it. But it's, now I think that you can't hide behind the facade of well, we're the big mystical consulting firm. It's hey, there's a tool I just saw yesterday. It's called heyboss.xyz. You can put a prompt in and it'll design, build, and launch apps, websites, and games. And nothing required. There's all these AI tools that you can use now that are they do the code or they do the design or they do the infrastructure, but now it's all of it in one. You just type some stuff in and it generates it out there. And obviously you could debate that the quality isn't as where it could be right now, but better believe in the next couple of months, it's going to get 10 times better. GPT just launched Operator yesterday, which is you can, natural language, it tell to do stuff, and Operator, basically your operating system as a human, it will go do the actions for you. It'll go find the groceries and buy them through Instacart. It'll go book you your trip. It'll actually do the stuff, right? And so my belief is if you've got 5 people that are equipped with the right tools, right? You've got a bunch of Iron Men, right? Anyway, take Tony Stark, give him an Iron Man suit. Dude's worth 1,000, soldiers. that's essentially what I think the world is moving to. And so part of why I quit, part of why I wanted to start StealthX was I'm like, I think a team of 5 can hit harder than a team of 55. If you give them the right tools and you give them the right mindset, they're going to crush. And if they focus only on value, like all they give a shit about is value, value, value. I'm not trying to just move secondary metrics. I'm not trying to like make executive so-and-so feel good and look shiny in front of their peers, right? It's really about like, no, we're going to make the business more money or we're going to save you money. And that's bottom line. Like that's what we're doing.
So that was really helpful to help me understand. And I think, sharing, I remember my 3-month observation when I had left, I had shared some things. I'm not very much on LinkedIn anymore, at least posting, but in this case, it was one of the trends I was seeing, which I think your company is actually moving towards, is full stack experience designers. I call them experienced DJs, but effectively we've already had tools, Figma, User Zoom, like that allow sort of a UX team of one. But I think what you're saying, and I think maybe this is the piece that maybe needs to be a bit more, I guess what I'm saying is like, I think you should be crisper with, by anti-consultancy, what we mean is you need the strategic human brains. You need when you pay a consulting company, like you're getting a whole bunch of, you're probably getting, depending on who, you're going to get some low-level people that are learning on the job. You're going to get 1 or 2 people in the room that are in sales and know what they're doing. Bottom line is here, this company is basically only people that have full command of the tools. And what we've learned is we see this coming and we've created a company that allows us to effectively outsource a tremendous amount of throughput, of material development, of all this, that we can do that piece. So what you're paying for is pure golden brain. And the things that typically I'd have somebody on my team produce for you, like I can do that myself in about 8 minutes in a prompt. So like, I think that piece coming across, because I do think what you are doing, it is still consulting, right? But I think the way that you're rendering that is to say, I will interrogate every single design and deliverable I give you to ask myself, is this something that's actually advancing the business? If it's a persona template, like, is that actually moving a needle for a business? If you need it in particular, then we'll do it. But like really being precious about saying the things that you're paying me to do for my brain power, a pretty looking deck. If you need it, yes. If you don't, we're not doing that. We're only doing the things that you need. And whether you believe it or not, our job is to get you to do this as quickly as you can. So we're going to talk you out of things that you think companies like us do if we don't think it's actually going to add value. Like that to me is, there are so many companies that will hire you tomorrow to get rid of that noise.
Yep. I think it's also, fundamentally the consulting business model is try to get as many people as possible for as long as possible at the highest rates possible. That's what it is. Like it's like, and there's this continual push or gravitational pull, if you will, around like that, right? How do you get to the annuities business? How do you get to the retainers? How do you get to the long-term, like sustainable revenue that you can then say, we've got this bank of clients and they're paying us this much money every month to just keep the lights on, keep everything running. And fundamentally, I think that's honestly, like, I think it's stupid because you become a crutch, you become a leech. You're just sucking off the teat of the larger organization who just keeps dumping money. And this is another thing that I think is important. Like a lot of times, mid-level management at a company, they're spending other people's money, right? It's not their money. They don't feel it, right? Like they still get paid at the end of the day. They could go blow $1 million on some stupid thing that's not going to actually make the company more money or benefit the organization or the customer or whatever. And like, maybe they lose their job, maybe, right? Or maybe they don't get their bonus if it doesn't go well. But like most of the time, nothing happens, right? Because they're not accountable.
There's a line. Nobody gets fired for hiring McKinsey. Which, by the way, their models, they have zero execution experience. And I can name you any number of companies that they've said, this is a great thing to do, from literally what they probably copy and pasted, that has no cultural relevance in an organization, right? Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And I'm not going to pretend like everything that I'm saying is not necessarily like novel or groundbreaking. It's basically just like, do what you say you're going to do. Focus on actually like the work and not just talking about the work, and like make sure that what you're making or whatever you're producing actually helps your client make money. It's which I think often consultants they're not held accountable for that, right? The result is kind of like, client, good luck. Like, it's your job to make sure that this actually sticks and that you make money from it and that you realize the value. Not my job. Like, you're paying me just to tell you what to do and tell you how to do it. But like, I'm ultimately going to leave you accountable for the thing. And I think that it's probably going to become more and more common that the expectation is, if we're paying you to come and do a job, you actually got to like make sure that it happens. Like,
the first conversation shouldn't be how pretty does it look, or we have to redesign our site. It's, as experienced designers, our job is to say, what business results are you going to forget? It might not be a website. You might think it's redesigning the website. It could be something completely different. I don't want to start talking to you until I understand what your business is, what you want to make money doing, and what you think my company can help you make money doing. Then we'll talk about the interface. Then we'll talk about the experience. But bottom line is, grounded in that business, let's figure out what you want to do, and then we can figure out whether you want to do any of this. I'm sure I told you this, or we've been in pitches with this, but I used to talk so many people out of journey maps. I'm like, it's a fantastic tool. I'm like, what is your plans after? Well, if you don't have a plan for actually who's going to own it, execute it, monitor it, like, it's it's $125,000 PowerPoint. Like, you don't need it. I can go in a room with you in a half day. We can sketch up enough for you to get what you need to get done. Don't buy a journey map. What's your business problem? And it's like those types of conversations and those types of relationships. Like, typically, sometimes we didn't get the work, but sometimes they were like, all right, well, I appreciate the fact that you talked me out of it. Let's do some of this. So, but it's that honesty and integrity that I think you certainly are born with and bring with StealthX, that I'm really going to be interested to see who you beat out for some of these jobs.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, man. To me, like, there's going to be this really interesting upheaval in the professional services world where, those who have gotten to where they are because they're, resting on their laurels, they're talking about all the things that they've done in their past and talking about the webinars and the white papers and the stuff that no one reads or watches anyway. Like, I think that's going to get disrupted, and you're going to have these smaller, leaner tiger teams that kind of come in and just start crushing, you know what I mean? Because you're going to have like armies of people who are just like, can't move fast enough with everything that's changing. You know what I mean? Like InfoSec won't let you test and experiment fast enough. Like, you're locked down, you're shackled to the way things are, the status quo. And so I just think there's going to be a lot of smaller boutique companies that are just like they're just going to kill it, And I've had, over the last 7 months since I started StealthX, I've met probably like 30, 40 other people who are kind of doing something similar to what I'm doing. And it's pretty beautiful because you've got this collective of, teams, like little, special forces teams that are all over, that are, they're really, really good at like this thing. And there's kind of like this fabric of people who are doing this. And a lot of them are like disenfranchised with the way things have been. They're disenfranchised with corporate. They've come from big agency, big consultancy, and they're like, it's just not working. I'm not going to do it that way anymore. And I don't know. It's gonna be fascinating to watch. It's like the evolution of the gig economy. Like it's kind of like this next phase of that, where there's a lot of fractional people. There's a lot of like small teams, and they're like, well, I can't do everything, but I know I have a lot of relationships across all these different places, so I can like cobble together this like team of Avengers.
There's guilds everywhere. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
I think one thing I want to call out with that, because I do know, I actually know a couple of them, starting their own, and they've either existed before their job was eliminated, but they've, these smaller consulting companies, typically guilds, where I've got my website and 5 other people are on my team, and they've got 5 websites and I'm on their team, and, we all represent our respective capabilities. That's all good. I think what the real differentiator is, because I've seen this is prior to even joining Slalom, these things have existed. But what's going to really be the difference, and what's going to be interesting to watch, are companies like yours. The soft skills part of this, make no mistake, all the hard skills, you could teach anybody to prompt. And the democratization of this field is already, the playing field is so equal right now that people that aren't even, if you get somebody who's moderately technical but really good at prompting and understands how to use AI, you can have folks that have no business, I shouldn't say no business being here, that's not fair, but basically have really little experience and proper strategy in this, that can come in and say, I can do your research, your website, your blah, 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 and I can have it done in 5 minutes. It's the soft skills side. And it's the ability to make sure that you are conveying that anybody can do this, but it's truly now the human hand that wields these tools. That is a strong, because your competition right now, I'm telling you, and I spend half of my day on following people on LinkedIn when I do log on, is that you've got these people, they're 24 years old. They are telling me the top 10 things that I need to care about, which I've seen 54 times before, but everybody is saying, and this is where my comment earlier about like, come on, man, like and I know you are different, but like everybody's saying they can do that. And I know actually can, but the amount of people, and again, I'm not saying that you can't do it if you're young, but the amount of people that have 2 to 3 years experience that are claiming to be global leaders and have sorry, I will be a little bit biased in this one and say you kind of need 5 to 7 years experience, at least in this field, before you can come up to anybody else and tell them how to do their job. Sorry.
Yeah. I think the soft stuff is right on. Like, I think it's this idea of the soul, right? Like the human component is the part that will never be replicated. And it's the nuance. Like I was talking to somebody this morning, we were having coffee and we were talking about like how important tools will be in professional services and how it'll make people, just faster and faster and better and easier, all that. But to your point, the soft stuff is the part that is going to be absolutely critical and is what will separate, the folks down here and everybody, the folks up here. Like you're going to have the ability to connect dots better, the ability to make relationships faster, the ability to like build trust, right? The ability to influence, the ability to navigate the Game of Thrones, right? Like, especially if you're in-house and you're this massive organization and there's going to be politics because that just comes with people, right? That's just part of human beings. Like people have opinions and they don't always agree. And so navigating and threading those things to get to outcomes, like that's going to be where I think people have to elevate to be really good at that, right? The soft skills become paramount and the hard skills are easy, right? Like to your point, you don't have to know all the ins and outs of how to design interface good. Like pixel pushing is a commodity, right? Code is a commodity. Frankly, research is a commodity. I know a lot of researchers be mad, me saying that, but it is like, the gathering of information and synthesizing that information is not hard anymore. I had a meeting today with another company. They literally, you feed it like thousands and thousands and thousands of rows of data, research data or voice of customer data, and it will look across all of it and detect, like it'll basically like do the pattern recognition and then tell you like, hey, here's every like conceivable category of complaint that your customers have. And like, boom, now you've got like, here's all the stuff. Here's how many people said it. Here's when they said it, dissects sentiment. Like that people manually did that not long ago. And now you don't have to do that anymore, right? So all of those commodity-based skills, while still important and, not like completely irrelevant, like double down on the soft stuff because it's definitely what's going to separate you from anybody else, right? Because anybody can just grab these tools right now off the shelf and just be like, boop-a-boop, here's your persona, here's your journey map, here's your service blueprint, here's your prototype. Oh, by the way, we just launched an app like in, a day. Good luck. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm interested if, beyond the screen stuff, I've got some thoughts, but I'm really interested in your position on what do you see as some of the trends? Like what are some things that StealthX is focused on as sort of new frontier-ish in terms of areas maybe that aren't, as to your point, everything's 2 years old in AI. Is there any areas of specialization or areas of interest where you are trying to be a bit of the vanguard?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's interesting because it feels like there's about 2 or 3 schools of thought on like the future of experience or whatever. And there's the people who are kind of like hardcore on the, like, you're just going to talk and like stuff's just going to be generated for you, right? Like there's not going to be any kind of interface. There's not going to be any kind of like, mouse, keyboard, any kind of accessory, whatever. You're just going to communicate and it's going to happen. Then there's people who are more like in the mixed reality camp, like you're going to have AR, VR type of, stuff. And then there's the people who are like, all of that's BS. Like we're never going to have that. That's 20, 30, 40 years in the future. I transparently, I was pretty hardcore on the AR VR train for a while. Like I was like, this I think is going to be the way. The more that time goes on, I'm like, it's probably going to have to be more like glasses kind of a thing. Like it has to be like lightweight, not in your face. Like you need to be unencumbered and it needs to be way cheaper. So we're still probably a little ways away from the mixed reality thing. I think the talking out loud and stuff happening is very much where it's continuing to go. And, you know, from my standpoint, I think there's a world in the very near future where we think about, I just said GPT operator came out yesterday. You talk and it's generating apps, products, dashboards, whatever, based on what you need. And it's hooked in all the data sources. No designers, no developers, no IT, no infrastructure. All that stuff doesn't matter anymore. No analysts. And so I think that the experience part, like, and where people should get really, really good is around this idea of like product market fit, like the rapid like validation of ideas to determine like what are the order of what's the like multiples of ROI on this idea and how can we like get it in the market as fast as possible with the tools, right? Like I think there's like designers and experienced folks are going to have to get really, really good at this, like vetting ideas. I think that's where people are going to start to get, those who can do that well are going to be just like further and further ahead of everyone else. Cause you're going to be able to say, this is a good idea. We're going to rapidly get it out there. We're going to test it. We proved it. Now it's generating revenue and we understand the business model because we see how it can create, you know, revenue for the customer, for the client or the company. And you're not going to have really any of this sort of classic design stuff. It's going to be more about like taking ideas and shaping them into something real as fast as possible and then testing it as fast as possible using the tools. That's my opinion.
It's really interesting you say that because candidly, I'm going to share that every once in a while, you know, ChatGPT is great. When you have to send a message and you want to soften it, you know, you say, hey, can you say this a little nicer? Like there's plenty of awesome uses for it. Where I knew it might be there one day, but where I was always a bit skeptical was like that ideation piece. Yeah, you can hallucinate, but like if we're thinking about some novel things for a business, like, so just by way, 2 or 3 months back, I was thinking about I love pub quizzes. And I'm like, hey, what if I set up like a new pub quiz with this feature or whatever? And I just typed in the prompt and I said, I always, for some reason, say, ChatGPT, give me 10 ideas for a game show with rules. And when I tell you, Drew, the names of the games, the nuance to the games, the rules of the games, the way that it was written was like, if there was another person in the room with me and we had kind of done ideas, I'd be like, crap, they're better than me. Not that I wouldn't have come up with them, but they were in 30 seconds. When I say like full rules, I'm like, oh my God, I could do that one. And then I'm like, oh my God, that's even better. Oh my God. That frightened the hell out of me because that told me something that I knew was coming, but it's here already, which is there is that really nuanced outside of the box creative thinking. And not even in the sense of like, make me a picture of or write this. It's ideas, ideation and concepting. That's really good.
Yep.
And how do you, so the kind of the thing, I guess to your point is like now as a consultant, I could go into meetings and say, listen, I thought about it myself. I put some of this in. Here's some that I just came up with, right? But absolutely AI augmented. And the funny thing is like, there's just still, I think maybe it's a function of age or the newness of AI, but like, there's this feeling of like, I feel like I stole that. Like, is that legit? Like, yes, I prompted that answer, but oh my God, like, I can't even take credit for like, this is really, really good. I don't know how we deal with that ethically. How do you ethically deal with you and I are, let's say, you know, you're better than me at this, but I can prompt better. So I can get into a room and be like, look at my, like, that is just, that's a challenge. I wish I could tell you I knew what the answer is, but this is something I think that the future leaders here, I'm almost happy that I'm sort of in the latter end, that I don't have to another 20 years to figure this out. It's going to be an exciting adventure, but it's going to really, really require every individual to figure out exactly where they want to play, because the amount of seats left for this stuff is, I'm going to say from 20 to 23, we lost 25% of them. We've lost another 50 to 60%. So when I say that the fractional amount of people that can do this, not to say that it wouldn't, but that pool is shrinking.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think ideas are cheap and execution is the hard part. And I think what is interesting is going to see like people are going to have to get comfortable with, I mean, think about this, like this is like not new. Like I remember, and you know this too, like remember back in the day whenever like stock photos started to become more and more prevalent, people were like, well, I didn't take this photo, so it's not really my photo. And then, you know, they get like, I feel bad like putting this photo that we didn't even shoot in this whatever, right? This like flyer or this, you know, thing. And then people got more and more comfortable with it because it really was like, it was more about the like end outcome that was more what mattered, and the source of the idea wasn't as important. I think that ideas will be like, there'll be thousands of hundreds of thousands, millions of ideas that constantly come out all the time. It's going to be the ability to discern quickly which ideas have legs, and then like activating on those ideas as fast as possible with the tools. And like, it's going to become like, especially for the next couple, 3 to 5 years, it's going to be like, who's the fastest to market and who can get as much distance between them and anybody else on whatever the thing is, right? And like it's going to be that discernment part is the hard part. Like ideas, you can get a shit ton of ideas easily. The executing on the ideas will get really easy. The discerning of which ideas are the right ones to focus on is going to be incredibly hard. Right now, already, I feel like just for us in StealthX, like, I mean, ideas are like flying, right? And we're like, which of these ideas should we focus on? Because we could do all of these ideas and they all hypothetically are good, but like, you've got to like pick the one and make the bet and go do it, you know?
Yep. I think that what I would love, I would just suggest what you have are the makings of the building blocks of describing what an anti-consultancy is, right? Ideas are cheap. Execution is strategy. Like, I think that what we're talking about here, but I think that I guess I wanted to, certainly we're coming up to time. I want to leave it like, this is why I'm excited about, for listeners, again, I was coming here to dump on it and be like, what's so different about you? And then I saw that, I'm like, oh, that's why. I think you want to go deeper on that, really help articulate what this means. Because it's not even so much about anti-consultancy, it's the new way of working. Like, it's not just consultancies, but the way that you articulate that, which to say is we can all generate ideas, we can all do it. But what you get with a company like ours is, it's basically you get all of the milk without the cow, right? But here's what that means. And here are some of the guiding principles that go behind that. I think that'd be great. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you being on the show. It's funny. We kind of flipped the script and turned the tables around on this one, which was great. I think folks are going to enjoy it. I would love for you to leave listeners with what are like 1 or 2 things people should take away from this conversation. And then where can folks find you online?
Sure. So I think if there's one thing to take away from the conversation, it's that we've been in the trenches together for a long time, and one of us is actually working out how to actually put it into practice. So I'm very excited to be there. And I just would say, watch this space. And I'm interested to see how your work manifests itself over time. Not from this conversation, but I would just continue to add that designing for trust each week, the ability of us to actually trust sources. I mean, again, in the future, it's going to be like, I will literally need a 4-digit code to verify that I'm literally talking to the live Drew Burdick. So are you 406-5? Like that, we are there. We have reached that point. Designing for trust is going to be key. And the second is that I think with the devolution of people working from home, for going to the office, I know there's a lot of return to that, but that second space, and we know this, being in a company has died, or in many ways is on life support. The culture there is pretty much, it's nothing. Talk to anybody, you pretty much get a sense that it's a dead man walking. So third spaces, the idea of my interest and where I think experience will still live. The future is in third spaces, because until the robots can truly get out there and do it, the idea for us to be able to design the communities, I think that's what I've come, me and the whole Communitas thing. But bottom line is, I think I was born for third spaces, and I'm starting to see how we can get human beings to gather in real life in the sense of community. Those are endangered species right now. And I think that is going to be an area of growth. So if you are in this field, really think about those third gathering spaces. Where you can find me, if you're ever in Jersey, exit 105. I live right off that. Yeah, I'm RonnieBatista.com is my website. I haven't been on it in months, so take a look and see what you think, and give me some feedback if you want to look at it. But thank you, Drew. This is awesome.
Yeah, man. Thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate the conversation. Look forward to, as always, man, your insights and your poking and your punk rock vibe always is just, it's good. It's a good, I think we add some good friction, make each other better, right? Something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, always. Yeah. Awesome.
All right, man. Appreciate you.
Yep. See ya.